Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. He's a man, goddamn.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases, presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. Got a fantastic episode and guest today. As always, a shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. Whether you're in the Kansas City area, the Midwest, or maybe out east and in New England like my guest today, or anywhere around the country for that matter, if you are in the market for a job, looking to hire someone, looking for a good resource, just check them out, chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. I love partnering with those guys because of our similar belief in culture and people, and so I'll leave it there and encourage you to check them out. As I mentioned, great guest today, and this is fun. I mean, I think that in this day and age, maybe in any day and age for that matter, you could probably talk golf year round. Certainly here in the Midwest, as we're recording this and we're getting into the summer months, spring and summer, it's, the golf courses are packed as long as it's not raining too much. But golf and hip hop intersect on today's installment of Rounding the Bases. Thanks to a bold lifestyle brand that hits differently. Joining me to tell the story is Jon Mason, the founder and creative genius behind SwingJuice. It began as an energy drink, but between tee times and t-shirt drops, it evolved into a rebellious line of apparel for life on and off the links. By pushing the bounds of traditional course culture, he's hit an ace for those who bring their entire personality to the game, whether serious players, weekend warriors, or those who are just here for the vibes. If you've seen my golf game, I'm probably just here for the vibes, but every now and then something good happens. I'm happy right now to be joined by Jon Mason. Jon, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that great intro, by the way. Happy to be here.
Well, it's good. It's good to have you. And I have a phenomenal assistant that helps me with the creative piece of all of that. I've got the creativity in me too. It's just who's got the time to do all of these things. And you know that as an entrepreneur, as a visionary, I'm so interested in this in part because the journey and where these things end up, and of course it's still evolving, but it's rarely where you think it was going to go or what you thought of when it started, or maybe in this case it was. What were you thinking when you came up with this concept?
It's interesting, as we were talking before. I mean, my whole life I've grown up a massive sports fan, played pretty much every sport. Baseball was my main sport. And then, once, my quote unquote baseball career was over, I started to really focus on, what was I going to do next? And again, my baseball career ended in college. I played at Providence College, Division I baseball in the Big East. But marketing was always sort of my passion. I was always an idea guy. So, I think once baseball was over, I was looking for something else to really feed that competitive spirit. So I just got into golf, and I just, it was funny when I was younger, my dad would always try to get me to play golf. And, my first response was always like, it's too slow. I can't play golf. It's too slow. So finally I got into golf, and I just immediately fell in love with it. So, during that time in those, I think it was around 2003, 2004, just was really, while I was playing golf and becoming obsessed with golf, I was also fascinated by, at the time, if you remember, brands like Red Bull and vitamin water were just seemingly popping up out of nowhere, and they were just taking over. I mean, you would see Red Bull everywhere. At any event that you would go to, you would see vitamin water at every event that you would go to, and it just always fascinated me. So it was like one particular Friday evening, a friend of mine, he would always coordinate all of our tee times, and he said to me at the time, he's like, "Hey Jon, let's go play golf tomorrow. I can get us a 6 or 6:30 tee time." And I'm like, 6:30 on a Saturday? Like, what? I don't know. Can we play a little bit later? And he's like, no worries. We'll just drink our SwingJuice and we'll be ready to go. And just immediately, I just, like, a light bulb went off. I'm like, wow, that would be a great name for like an energy drink to get you going on the golf course. So we went and played golf, and the results weren't great. But I came back the whole time. I was thinking about SwingJuice, and literally that night, I bought the domain name. I researched to see if anybody owned a trademark, and nobody owned the trademark. So I started the trademark process. And bought a few other things, got this, got all these things together. And then Monday morning, I'm sitting there like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? Because I'd never created a business before. I'd never created a product. I had an idea of what I wanted it to be in my mind, but that was, how this whole thing kicked off.
There's so many, to me, layers to this in terms of entrepreneurship, but also in terms of, competitiveness. You mentioned that, like, so many athletes, and this is a podcast that is even with the name and my ties and my life in baseball, it's really more about business and culture and leadership. But sports to me is such a great teaching tool. Baseball, this is such a great teaching tool because it's every day. I think golf is similar in the sense that they're both sports rooted in failure and managing that failure and learning. But I think business and entrepreneurship is like that. And I'm so fascinated by that story because there was an aha moment for you right away, even if there wasn't quite a vision, and then an action immediately, right? I mean, like within a matter of hours, days, you're buying a domain name, maybe not even knowing where this was going. What pulled at you? Something pulled at you. Like you weren't one of those guys that had bought 100 domains and done all that type of stuff. There are a lot of people that are constantly looking for that thing, but I didn't hear that in your answer. So what grabbed you in that moment to think, you know what? I got to jump and take a shot at that. And what were you thinking?
I really think it was a combination of, again, just really, I'd become immersed in this and almost obsessed with the fact that these brands I just mentioned were just seemingly popping out of nowhere. And marketing has always been, something that, I was just always interested in. So I think between the two of those, and then honestly, lastly, I asked my wife at the time, she's still my wife. My wife at the time, we had no kids at that point. I said, "Hey, I got an idea," and she was like, "What's your idea?" Now I go, "How about an energy drink by the name of SwingJuice that would help you like get going on the golf course?" And she sat there for about a minute, and she's like, "You know what? That's actually a pretty good idea." So I think it was like a combination of all those. And then I don't know. Maybe this is just part of my psyche. I've never really unpacked this with any professional help, but I just became obsessed with it. I just felt that, all right, I want to see if I could take it from this idea to the next step. And what that next step was, okay, if I want to make an energy drink, how do you make an energy drink? I had no idea. I had no experience in that industry whatsoever. So I just did a ton of research. At the time I was working in real estate, so I had some flexibility to, at night, just really kind of immerse myself with, okay, how do you, take a bottle of vitamin water. How do you create that product and how do you get it into the bottle? And then further down the road, how do you get it to somebody purchases it, puts it on the shelf? So over the course of about almost a year, I really did a lot of research into, what the different ingredients are in the different products. I knew I wanted it to be an all natural product because, just I'm a health conscious person. So that was really another thought that I had in my head. So over the course of that next year, from 2003 to 2004, I, again, just really dove in to see what I can do. And I finally was able to get some samples produced based off of a flavor profile. I started out with lemonade. I figured everybody likes lemonade, so let's start there. And again, I also did this whole exercise in branding. What do I want it to look like? Who is my target customer? And and then a year later, I got a bunch of samples and threw them in my trunk and hit the road.
So at that point, you're thinking, all right, I can come up with this great energy drink. But the company's so much more now, right? And I haven't heard anything about the vision for that at that point. I'm guessing you were very hyper focused on making the greatest energy drink, right? To satisfying those men and women on the golf course, trying to create something a little bit different in by the way, a very traditional world and that's always done things kind of the same way. Not all that different, by the way, than baseball, which is finally emerging from this is the way you do it and this is the way you've always done it to, hey, maybe we actually can show a little bit of personality. I think there's some parallels to baseball and golf there, but how did an energy drink turn into what this is now? Which, if you go to the SwingJuice website, you might not initially even know this is an energy drink. This is so much more. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the energy drink phase of the brand. So I almost look at the brand as two different life cycles. So life cycle one was strictly just the energy drink. I wanted it to be rooted in golf. So from 2004 to 2014. Basically we're based in New England. We're based just outside of Providence, Rhode Island. So, I say we, the first 10 years of the existence of the brand, I literally just drove around to try to get golf courses to bring the brand on to their snack shacks and get in their food and beverage. And one of the biggest clients I got at that time was Whole Foods. I think that was to me that was a really strong badge of honor and validation that this idea is something that can work. So over the course of 10 years, it got to a point where I had about 300 accounts. I was mostly self-distributing. I had a few distributor partners locally in New England, but I got to a point where, as I had mentioned before, naming these big brands, I could just see the writing on the wall. I didn't have the funding needed to really compete in that space. I mean, I remember one story, one time years back towards the end of the energy drink, because I knew the energy drink was going to end at some point, but I felt the brand could live on into something else. I remember, having an appointment with a contract packaging company to produce. I think it was producing 1,000 cases or something like that, very small. And I distinctly remember he called me the night before production that, hey, John, we have to bump you because we have vitamin water coming in and they're producing, 100,000 cases. And I'm like, oh, come on, this is a busy time of the year. And he's like, John, listen, vitamin water is going to spill more in an hour than you're going to produce during that whole time. So I think it was at that moment that I was like, okay, I need to take another path for the brand. So, over the course of the next year, I, sold down most of the inventory, and I just, I couldn't give up the idea that this can be something. So I, again, just being myself, just became immersed in golf culture, golf industry, seeing what was out there. And at the time, so this is around 2013, 14 now, I just noticed that there really wasn't any cool golf apparel out there, in my opinion. When I looked around, I saw very basic. And if you think back to that time, I believe it was true. Guys, men and women wearing khakis, solids, stripes, nothing that really stuck out. So I thought, okay, that could be an opportunity to, really push forward the brand into more of a lifestyle brand and be less of a beverage. So I said, okay, let me see if that can work. So the first thing I thought of, let me put together some cool golf t-shirts, because I didn't see any cool golf t-shirts. So I put together a few designs and got together with a few friends, a friend that was a web designer and a friend that was a graphic designer. And we kind of sketched it all up. And in February of 2014, I basically turned the lights off on the beverage and turned the lights on to SwingJuice apparel, and boom, that was pretty much it. And again, back to another moment of validation. The first day that I turned on the website for the t-shirt brand, a t-shirt sold within a few hours, without any advertising, without me even really telling anybody that it was happening. So it was right then and there. I'm like, okay, if I needed a sign, that was a sign that I made the right decision.
I think the brilliance in all of this, among many brilliant aspects, is the name works for just about anything you want to do within golf, right? I mean, hey, if I have SwingJuice, if I drink some SwingJuice, maybe it gives me a little bit of extra energy to get out of the golf course. Maybe as I'm making the turn, I get myself a little SwingJuice and I got a little extra energy. Okay, there's a lot of energy drinks out there. But now if I'm wearing some SwingJuice gear, maybe I got a little bit of extra clout. I got a little something extra that something has. And then you get on the website and you look at the line and it's like, it could be anything. It's fun. It's creative. And it feels to me like maybe you were ahead of the curve there, because the sport now has become fun and personality driven. Like, I'm not an avid golfer. I'm the kind of guy that's probably going to watch the last few holes of a major on a Sunday, in part because I'm probably hopping on a plane with the Royals and going somewhere, and I could watch the drama of the Masters. But it's for the non-golf fan, it could be a little dull and stuffy and boring. And I look at all of the merchandise and apparel that you have, none of it is boring. How early did you see that lane, or how at what point did you make that thought or that connection that SwingJuice really gives me the ability to do a lot of things?
Yeah, and I think for me it was especially initially, but even more so now, I think it's about really trying to wear your passions on your sleeve, the really show your passion for what you like and what you do. So to go back to some of our original t-shirt designs, it was golf and hip-hop. When I first came up with that, I'm like, all right, well, I love listening to hip hop. I love hip hop. I love the history of hip hop. I love golf. I like listening to music on the golf course. Why not put those two things together? It may not make a lot of sense when you first, see it or hear it off the top, but it makes sense. Again, I just try to put together a few of my favorite things, and I thought, all right, well, there's got to be more than just me out there that enjoy this. Golf and tacos. I'm a massive foodie. I'm obsessed with food and cooking, and I love tacos. So I'm like, all right, golf and tacos have that people somebody else has to be out there and like that. So, the thought process has always been, try to put some more personality into golf. Where at the time, it really was lacking. You see a lot of it now, and I hope that I helped spur that on a little bit from the beginning, because there really wasn't anything out there like with what I was doing and now what our team is doing. But I really think it's a lot of that. I think you can really express yourself, in a place where it may not seem like you have the ability to, but I feel like anybody can. And I think if you look good, you play good, and we just keep going from there.
There are golf and taco socks, by the way, on the website. Golf and ganja shirts, if you're into that, and really anything you can think of, and you do, like, it is fun that you could see that sort of foodie interest or influence. Pimento cheese sandwich squad. I mean, there's just all types of stuff. Or hey, this is good for Father's Day, by the way. Best dad by par. I mean, just a lot of fun, creative stuff that I think when you look at it, it makes you smile. It makes you feel good, which I guess was the point all along, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the game of golf and the sports world. Golf in particular, had a history of being more of a stuffy sport, more serious. Whether it be country club culture, or just the rules of golf. It had a history of being just older demographic. Not exactly rules following. Tucking your shirt, that whole atmosphere. But I think now, as you've seen, the demographic of golf has dramatically lowered. I think a lot of these, the older golf establishment has accepted the fact that you may see somebody out there that has an untucked shirt, and you may be a few fairways away and you hear some music playing. But I think that's really, to me, is the way that the game is going to grow. It's going to get people that see something that that they've never tried before. You try it once, you hit one good shot, how it is, you're hooked for the next time. But if you have a more relaxed atmosphere, there's a better chance you're going to come back in again and again.
Before we get to my baseball theme questions, I just want to make some parallels to baseball, in part certainly because of my world, but also because you came from that world, and you're telling me still an avid baseball fan, but you played college baseball. And I do see so many similarities in the two sports that are very rooted in tradition, which I think is great. but two sports that over time have been slow to evolve. But it feels to me like, this is just my assessment. We live in a world right now. I mean, my kids are college age kids, and of course they grew up differently than we grew up, and it's in a time of social media. It's in a time of immediacy. It's in a time of personality, and it's really fascinating to me because this is my 18th season with the Royals, and I've seen sort of different generations come through. And when I say generations, I mean like this is the way you do things, and then it sort of changes to this and that. This group right now is all about their personal brand, and they're not begging for camera attention. It's not that, but they're willing to do a lot of things that guys in the past weren't willing to do, and willing to do some of those things away from the stadium, or showing personality and maybe promoting a brand. Whereas in the past, it was like, well, you can't do that. If you're doing that, you're seeking too much attention. And I think there's some similarities between that. Am I reading that right? Because it feels to me like we are at a day and an age right now where this is ripe for the taking, and that you got in ahead of that.
Absolutely. When I first started this, again, back 2003 to 2004, there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't Facebook, YouTube. And again, I might be dating myself a little bit, but you fast forward to now, like, I have two kids, two younger girls. They don't watch TV. Like they consume YouTube content, or TikTok content, or it's just completely shifted. So I think, especially with like younger players, the way they've grown up is exactly what you're describing. I mean, they're in a place where the content that they consume is non-traditional to what we grew up with. And I think, they're adapting to it because it's what they know, but I feel like just sports culture is adapting to it, because golf is a perfect example of that. Bryson DeChambeau is the most popular golfer on the planet right now, and it's mainly driven by his success online in his YouTube channel. And when the Masters was going on, even the U.S. Open last year, you poll kids, to call it age 8 to 14 or whatever demographic. Their favorite golfer is Bryson DeChambeau, because every week they're consuming a new Bryson DeChambeau, show or piece of content, and it's just completely shifted. But I also think it is the wave of the future. And then how we have handled that, it's still trying to keep up and get in the mix of it, but it's where everything is headed.
I think the lesson is you got to continue to evolve, because the world just will, whether you like it or not, as you get older too, and you want things to be the way they once were. It just doesn't work that way. I remember a conversation I had with a producer in my early years with the Royals. I want to say it was, I don't know, 2009 or 10. I remember sitting on the plane by him and pitching the idea that, because I'd built a big Twitter following, I was really the only guy on our broadcast team that was actively on Twitter, and fans were engaging. And I pitched to my producer. I said, why don't we answer some questions during the game, like live on TV? And he said, nobody's going to be on Twitter and watching the game at the same time, which, I pushed him on that, but it didn't sound as preposterous as it sounds now. The point being that now that sounds crazy, because of course people are doing two things at once, and they're not just doing two things, they're doing 3 or 4 things. And by the way, it's probably not on Twitter anymore, which isn't even called Twitter, right? The point being that everything changes. And I'm guessing that for a guy like you, who we've heard in this conversation, your mind's constantly thinking of new things, and how would this work? How would that work? That's perfect for you, right? That you're a guy that probably doesn't want to stay still too much.
You're 100% correct. I mean, it's just, I guess, just how I'm built. And it also too, I've again, speaking of continuing to evolve, I've always immersed myself in in pop culture, and whether it be fashion or technology, and just always trying to stay on top of trends and seeing where things are headed, because again, I think if you don't do that, you do run the risk of falling behind, potentially becoming obsolete, because as things change on a daily basis. And I'm sure, and again, back to sports analogies, it's tough, for older coaches to relate to some of the younger talent that's coming up, because they've grown up in this digital age that's completely different, from what an older coach may have experienced or have coached in the past. So but I think it's exciting because, again, from a baseball perspective, it's bringing new eyes to baseball. Baseball and golf are in the same place where they need more eyeballs. And I think the more, both sides can evolve from embracing sort of the new technology and where fans are consuming product. I mean, listen, 20 years ago, everybody would watch broadcast TV, Sunday Night Baseball, Baseball Tonight. Now it's clips on YouTube, it's clips on TikTok. So if we don't evolve with that, you're not going to really get anywhere.
There's no question about it. And I tell people all the time that I'm actually doing what I dreamed of doing from the time I was before teenage years, but not really, because there weren't pre and post game shows for every team. And that's what I host every single day. There weren't sideline or in-game reporters except for the big national game of the week. And there certainly weren't podcasts, and on and on and on. So it's like, who knows what is coming next? But I love the evolution of it all. I love the fact that in baseball, the guys with the fun bat flips would have been the bad guys before. And now every kid wants to do it. Every kid has seen it. I don't even try to tell my 22-year-old son about anything that's happened, because the notification's already gone off on his phone. That's the world that they're living in, and you have to evolve with it. So we agree, and I think it's a really fascinating part of sports, entrepreneurship, and really the world as we speak. All right, let's go baseball themed questions here. It's not really a baseball question, although I might have a baseball question for you in my final four. But professionally speaking, a business, what's the biggest home run you've hit?
When I look back, I've always seen it's hard to see what I'm doing right now. I always, look back and say, okay, if those stars aligned, for whatever reason, however reason. But I can honestly say, I would say my biggest home run is really making that pivot from beverage to apparel. I had every reason to quit beverage. I had every reason to just give up on the brand, between, again, essentially running it by myself. From the financial piece of it was stressful. Just the whole thing was just a ball of stress. I could have very easily just walked away and say, you know what, that was a great experience or a terrible experience, however you want to look at it, and then just moved on with my life. But I felt like there was something else. So to make that pivot from, and it's essentially a 180. It's same brand, just two different things. Making that pivot was definitely the right move, and I look back and I'm just so glad that I took that next step to see it through.
It's the ultimate home run, and one that you couldn't see happening, right? I mean, to me, it's the best kind. It really is. How about a swing and a miss along the way? And I'm guessing there's been more than one, but a swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
So you'll appreciate this one, because this is sort of based in your home base. So this was about 3 years ago. We were, I think it was end of June. So do you remember when Patrick Mahomes was playing in the match? And I forget who he was playing with at the time. I don't think Tiger was on there, but he was on the match. It was televised. It was like, Barkley was on, Ernie Johnson. They were on the broadcast. So the whole time Mahomes is just drinking Coors Lights. He's drinking Coors Lights. So they're live. They have a live mic, and Ernie Johnson asked Pat, hey Pat, he was playing really well to boot. He was playing really well in his first few holes. So he asked Patrick, why are you playing so well? Like, what's going on? It's like, oh, I'm just drinking my SwingJuice, and everything is going to be great after that. So I went to Twitter just to see, if it kind of caught on, and people were like live tweeting, like, oh, Mahomes is drinking SwingJuice, and they kept showing him pictures, drinking beers, blah blah blah. So I watched the whole match, and he must have said it a couple dozen times. Ernie Johnson kept talking about it. So I said to myself, all right, well, let me reach out to Coors Light. Let me see if there's something we can do here. Literally the next day, I'm searching to see who I can reach out to Coors Light. And then at the time, the chief marketing officer of Coors Light reached out to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you watched the match last night, but people were talking about SwingJuice all the time, referencing Coors Light. Maybe there's something we can do here." So we got on a couple calls. We decided we were going to do a Coors Light SwingJuice collab, and the goal was to get Patrick, because he's sponsored by Coors Light, but during the football season he can't mention Coors Light because Budweiser is the or at the time was a big sponsor of the NFL. So we worked this whole thing where they were talking with Pat's team. We were putting some designs together. We put a whole collection together, and we were going to get it to him before the American Century Championship, which is the celebrity event in Lake Tahoe that's usually after 4th of July. Put a whole collection together, sent it to him. At the last minute, his agent said, "We can't do this because he has an Adidas contract." So, we're all devastated. Still, we still got some great buzz with Coors Light, but I thought to myself, you know what? I was able to, because I was paying attention to the match, I was able to put something together that pretty much got to the 1 yard line. And it didn't work out. It ended up working out in terms of elevating the brand a little bit more. But it was exciting, the buzz of it all. And again, I think Pat got the original designs, but he was just never able to wear it. But again, it was exciting. We took a shot, didn't work out, but I think again, just more validation that if we continue to try to do things like that, something will eventually hit.
Yeah, the business side of it jumped in the way, but at least you knew that the best quarterback in football
intention was there.
Yeah, best quarterback in football was interested in SwingJuice, or I don't know, maybe it was Tom Brady was the best at that point.
Tom Brady was, and still
I don't want to poke at
you. Maybe that'll be for another show.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, we can talk about Belichick. No, we're not going to do that. Okay, let's go to the final one. Small ball. What are the little things that add up to big results? You remember from your baseball days, advancing the runner and the bunts and all those things you don't get credit for. What's small ball to you?
So we have a great team here. I think when I have two different lives with this thing. One, the beginning of it, more than 50% of the time of me building this brand, I was doing it again essentially by myself. Now that I have a team with me, I think a lot of the small ball happens behind the scenes, creating a system, creating an organization, our customer service, our shipping. I mean, I would put our team against anybody else in our industry. We really pride ourselves in, getting the orders right, getting the shipping as quickly as possible. And, all of those things that happen behind the scenes that most customers don't see. It's like when you order something from, name your big brand, and you get it within a day or two. You don't think that, okay, well, somebody picked your products. We, packaged it in a professional way, and then shipped it out timely. And then if you have a question, it's answered in a timely fashion as well. I think all of those little things have really helped us propel forward to, again, I would put our team and our process against anybody else in our industry. And I think that really is part of the reason why, we have a pretty bright future in growing the brand.
Yeah, that's a small ball element of, differentiating yourself from everybody else, because not everybody pays attention to those details, and it matters certainly when you're not the big boy, so to speak,
right?
As you continue to grow that brand. All right, 4 final questions as we round the bases. A couple lighthearted ones to start. First one, give me the scouting report of Jon Mason, the baseball player, back in the day, of course.
So speed on the bases, power hitter. I could track balls in center field like nobody's business. So had a little trouble with curveballs, some off-speed pitches, but you throw me fastballs, I could catch up to it and do something useful with it.
Left side or right side?
Right side. Right hitter. Right side.
Good to hit that over the monster, right? For your hometown.
Actually, real quick, I just a real quick story. Speaking of Fenway Park, I had a tryout for the Red Sox at Fenway, and I honestly, when I didn't perform as well as I wanted to, because the stage completely overwhelmed me. Like I'm, in the outfield at Fenway Park, they're hitting fly balls. I wasn't ready for the moment. I was just looking around like inside the ballpark on the field. So definitely a learning experience for sure.
There's just that place is so magical. I told you before we got on, it's my favorite stadium. I always say when people ask me to rank the stadiums, I leave Kauffman Stadium out of it because it's my home. It's like looking at your own home versus somebody else's. But I also say you can't really compare Fenway to anything else but Wrigley because they're in a class of their own. For some reason, I like Fenway better than Wrigley. When I grew up from 13 on in Chicago, and it just, I don't know, there was always this mystique to Fenway for me because I never made it there till I was actually the first time I ever was inside Fenway. I remember driving outside the wall or walking past the wall when my family was visiting once when I was a kid. But first game I was ever at Fenway was the 2004 World Series, Game 1.
Oh, is that right?
I was working in St. Louis, and so I went out there with local news station to cover games 1 and 2, and of course the Red Sox swept that, and the curse of the Bambino was over. So
I remember it well.
Pretty cool stuff. Okay, and you were very busy with some things going on at that point too, I think, with SwingJuice. All right, second question. It is a brand based on or originating with golf. How is the golf? See, the pitchers were always the best golfers. I always felt like because at least to this day, right now, they can do it more often than the position players. But how's the golf game? How much do you play?
So golf game is evolving. It's funny. I also describe my golf game as before kids and after kids.
Oh, yeah.
So, before kids, I was, single digit handicap, 10-9 handicap, playing pretty well, trending in the right direction. Had kids, and then I just started playing more regularly over the last, few years. So, getting in the right direction again. I play more often now than I have in forever. But I remember years ago somebody told me, if you want to play more golf, don't get in the golf business, which is 100% true. But I've found a way to squeeze it in more often. So I'm getting closer to where I was 10, 15 years ago.
All right, that's good. That all makes sense. Third question as we round the bases. We talked about marrying golf with hip hop. And so that's a change in culture. And we're seeing, I think, hopefully more of that. For me, if I'm going to get on the golf course and listen to some hip hop and have that going in the, on the golf cart, I'm going to start with a little Tribe Called Quest for me. But that's my roots. And I guess I'm old school now. I'm getting older, but I don't even know if the kids listen to that anymore. I'm fine with some Kendrick Lamar or something like that too. But you got to go to what will be a go-to hip hop choice on the golf course.
Well, you hit, you got a triple right out of the box.
Wow, nice.
Tribe Called Quest. I mean, you can't go wrong there. No. I love late 90s hip hop, Tupac, Biggie Smalls.
Yeah.
I'm a Jay-Z fan. Again, like in anything late 90s, mid 90s to early 2000s, I'm in. Hip hop nowadays, if I try to compare, again, it's like trying to compare.
That's right.
Different eras of sports. It's tough to compare, but honestly, to me, it's golf and hip hop, like our golf and hip hop designs really encapsulates more like golf and music. I mean, whatever you're into. If you're into country, I've become more into country over the last few years. Whatever makes you feel good on the golf course. I was actually playing with a friend of mine. He's a former NFL player, and we were playing one time last year, and he was playing jazz music. I'm like, what are you playing? He's like, it just helps me relax. I'm like, I never even thought about that, but it's true. We played the whole round. He was playing jazz music, and it was just, that was a new one to me, but it works.
Yeah. That's cool. That's fun. That's fun to kind of discover that and open the doors a little bit, or just challenge that mind. Absolutely. Okay, fourth question, the walk-off. Amidst all of the designs and everything that you've got in terms of apparel, current or past, do you have a favorite or one that popped into your head that you're like, oh man, I'm really, really proud of that one?
It goes back to one of our originals, one of our OG designs is Golf and Tacos. It just like I had mentioned earlier, I'm a food nerd. And again, like to really that was really the first thing that I said I'm going to put my two favorite things together, golf and tacos. And I'm like, this may not make a lot of sense to people, or it's going to make all the sense in the world. And 9 times out of 10, it makes all the sense in the world to people. So I would put that at the top of the list for sure.
I love it. There's so much good stuff on there, and it's not just golf too. I mean, there's a baseball isn't boring T-shirt. There's
which is our top selling baseball theme design. We partnered with Joe Kelly and Rob Bradford. I'm sure you're familiar with. And a couple of years ago, we got together with them to really try to start a movement. And I think it really, if you're a baseball fan and you're, especially somebody who, loves the history of baseball, it really speaks to you, and it resonates for sure, which is great.
It's great stuff, all of it. Encourage everybody to check out the website if you have not already, or go back, swingjuice.com. Incredible story, and I think so much to learn in terms of entrepreneurship, pivoting, understanding markets and people, and challenging a little bit too the norm, or a lot, I should say. Jon, thanks so much for spending time on Rounding the Bases. Really enjoyed hearing your story, and looking forward to hopefully catching up with you this summer in New England.
Absolutely, Joel. Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate the time, and it was great to be with you. And yes, let's get together at Fenway this summer. I'd love to do it.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.